And the first talk, to not bother you with any boring introduction, is by Omer. He's giving a talk on bug bounty programs. And what I should say is the talk is award-winning in the sense that Omer won the Distinguished Paper Award of the prestigious Usenix conference. So who knows the Usenix conference? Okay, well, you know it, I know that, great. So the Usenix conference is one of the most prestigious security conferences in the world, and it's a research conference. It's a conference where people hand in their submissions, and then they get reviewed, and after this, well, one of the best papers is selected. And one of the best papers was the one by Omer, and I'm very happy to have him to let us know a bit about the incentives and the perspective of bug hunters. So please join me in welcoming Omer on stage. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for joining me for this presentation. I'll be talking about our paper that appeared at Usenix called Bug Hunters' Perspectives on the Challenges and Benefits of the Bug Bounty Ecosystem. I'm Omer. I'm a PhD student at the University of Maryland. Hopefully not for long. I'll be heading to Carnegie Mellon as a postdoc. These are my collaborators, Taha, Amit, Omer Akgul, Jens, Michelle, Darren, and Aaron. And you can see their institutions over there. I'm not going to read all of them. All right, let's start. Okay, bug bounty programs. What are they? Well, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar, but allow me to introduce them again. Bug bounty programs are essentially these big wanted posters posted by companies or organizations looking for security vulnerabilities. I would characterize them as a crowdsourced vulnerability discovery system where bug bounty hunters find vulnerabilities, they report them to whoever's looking for them, and they get compensation or recognition in return. Now, if you take these bug bounty programs and you post them all on a big wall, you throw a couple managers in there, well, that creates a bug bounty platform. A bug bounty platform is these places that help connect bug bounty hunters and bug bounty programs together. It's a centralized place. They can help standardize some of the hunter-manager communication process, so the people working at the companies that are going to deal with the bugs and the people actually finding the bugs. HackerOne, BugCrowd are some of the big ones that have existed for years. In recent years, there's been a couple in this area that's come up also. But there aren't a whole lot of them out there. Okay, now, why do I care about them? Why should you care about them? Well, bug bounties work great for organizations. There's a lot of them, anywhere from for-profit organizations, companies, to governmental organizations, nonprofits. They're cheaper to run than an in-house team. Running your own red team, it's much cheaper. And it provides you access to a diverse set of skills and the sort of testing that isn't necessarily that traditional with red teams. To date, there's been over 400,000 vulnerabilities found through these, and those are only from public reports. There's a lot of private programs that are going on that's not being reported. So it's having quite an impact. All right, so it seems like everything's fine, right? They work great. They work well for companies. They found a bunch of vulnerabilities, and they're cheap. Well, what about them? Well, it turns out it's great for companies, but there's been little research into looking at the hunters, the people that are doing the actual work, the workers here. And so that's the perspective we took. We asked about their experience. Why do they do it? What are the challenges they face? The hunter's perspective. And so when we're approaching this problem, we had 4 high-level questions in mind. What are the benefits? Why do people do this stuff? What are factors in choosing between programs? There's a lot of companies out there with bug bounty programs, and so hackers need to prioritize. They pick one and work on that. What are the challenges they face in this ecosystem? And finally, which platform utilities are useful? Why do these platforms exist, right? And while we were asking these questions, what we really cared about is what factors were the most important. Because sure, there's going to be a lot of factors, but how do we prioritize? Which features aren't working the best? What are the challenges that are the most pressing? And so with this goal in mind, we had a multi-pronged approach at this research problem, starting off with a factor free listing study. What this is essentially we got a bunch of hackers, we asked them what they cared about within these 4 high-level questions, what are the factors that came up. And we got responses. The responses were kind of messy. So we went through qual coding, which is essentially this formal labeling process of how to do this stuff. And we ended up with a big list of factors. Now, remember, we want which ones were the most important versus the least. So we designed a second study, a factor rating study, where we asked even more hackers to rate each factor in terms of how important they thought it was. We did some quantitative analysis on this, and we got our nice little list of ordered factors. Now, while we were doing all this is survey work, which means you don't get a lot of rich information. You don't get a lot of reasons. You just get what the status is. And so we conducted interviews with a bunch of hackers, 24 of them, in fact, to get really in-depth reasoning behind why they think a certain factor is more important than another one, why they don't even consider certain factors, etc. All right. That brings me to our participants, who we talked to, who we surveyed. It was a wide range from all around the world, anywhere from South America to India to Russia and Europe. They worked anywhere from a couple hours to more than full-time on bug bounties a week. They found anywhere from a couple bugs to hundreds of bugs over their career, and anywhere from a couple months of experience to years of doing this stuff. Now, all that to say, our participants looked pretty similar to what bug bounty platforms report in their annual reports of what a bug hunter looks like, which is to say that we think our results are pretty generalizable to what's actually going on out there. Okay, so let's get into some results. What are the factors? Well, again, let me remind you, we got 4 high-level questions that we're interested in: the benefits, factors between choosing programs, the challenges that these people face, which platform utilities are useful. And if I were to list all the factors, well, it's this big list. And we don't have enough time to go through all of these, not even mentioning the interviews that we did. So we're going to focus this a little bit. Let's focus it on these top 3, these 3 high-level questions. Let's discuss the factors there. We'll touch a little bit about the useful platform utilities, but not too much. Okay, starting off with benefits of bug bounty. Why do people do this stuff? And just a side note, the reason why we're interested in this is because we need more bug hunters. We need more skilled bug hunters. The cybersecurity workforce really needs more workers. It's in a worker shortage. Okay, starting off, monetary rewards, kind of unsurprising, right? People do it for money, no surprises there. But a close second was learning and improving your skills. Being able to be a better hacker was a big motivator for these people. Fun was often cited. They like the challenge. They like spending all that time to find that niche vulnerability and getting rewarded for it. It's kind of like, think about it, it's kind of like gambling, right? You put in all that time, you might not find a bug and not get compensated for it, but when you do, it's a big payoff, and people like that stuff. Legal safe harbor was often cited. Legal safe harbor is this promise by companies made to hackers, essentially promising that they won't pursue legal action if they stay within the rules. Now, you might think that that's obvious. Turns out it's not. A lot of companies have gone and filed lawsuits against hackers in the past. So people they give importance to that. Flexibility is another one. Being able to hack whenever, wherever, whatever you want. Kind of this realistic way of hacking, like in an adversarial sense, a black hat would do. What we didn't find is reputation scoring to be important. This was surprising to us because going in, we thought reputation would be one of the top factors that motivate people, right? The clout you get from it, how much you can brag about the bugs you found. But turns out it's maybe not that important. Now, before I move on, I want to do a little bit of a deep dive into learning and improving because, like I said, I think it's pretty important to improve the workforce. It's not only important for bug bounty programs, the ecosystem to be better, but more broadly, the entire cybersecurity workforce. Okay, so how do people learn? How does this happen? Well, turns out it's practice, right? Doing it helps you learn. But mentors is pretty important too. So bug bounties, it's inherently competitive, right? It's a marketplace. Who's going to find the bug first? But turns out people help each other. It's counterintuitive, but people will teach each other how to hack, common things to look for. They will write up blog posts and whatnot, which we'll talk in a minute. And so it's this competitive space, but it can also be very friendly. It could be inviting environment. Publicly disclosed bugs was a big one. So what will happen is hackers will go and they'll look at publicly disclosed bugs. When a hacker submits a bug, the bug is usually not disclosed at the end of the day, but some of them are. And hackers can go look at this stuff and see what type of vulnerabilities are being exploited through these programs and maybe apply some of the same techniques themselves. A little more facts about these publicly disclosed bugs. They're also used for intelligence. If you want to work on a program, you want to find what's vulnerable within a company, what you could do is you could look at the publicly disclosed bugs already and kind of get a sense of what's the attack surface. What can I exploit here? What can I start poking at? And so they're useful for that too. That also leads to advertisement. It leads to an advertisement for hackers to look at your company. If there's a bunch of publicly disclosed bugs, well, maybe there's a bug for me too. Maybe I should start looking at it. Write-ups are pretty important, blog posts and whatnot. These are somewhat similar to publicly disclosed bugs, but what you get from these write-ups is how the hacker thinks when they're trying to develop this exploit, develop this vulnerability. And you don't necessarily get that from publicly disclosed bugs, so those were also pretty important. Again, what we didn't find was platform resources for learning to be very important. We found that maybe they were a bit more useful with beginners, but not necessarily for people maybe further down their career paths. And we think maybe there's some room for improvement there. Okay, so we've talked about some of the benefits, but it sounds like these benefits apply to all bug bounty programs, right? Well, it turns out there's important nuanced ways that maybe there's differences. Starting off with, so now we're discussing how people select between programs, going from benefits to how people select between programs, because there's a lot of them. Starting off with scope. Scope is what you're allowed to look at, where you can find vulnerabilities. Here you can see that hacker1.com and api.hacker1.com is within scope, so you can go do whatever to try to vulnerability. Tech familiarity was also very important and highly tied to the scope, where the hacker will look for a certain technology that maybe they're more familiar with, they feel more confident, such that they can find vulnerabilities. Or maybe they want to learn that technology because remember, learning is a big focus here. So they'll look for that. In this case, GraphQL, JavaScript, some AWS stuff is within scope. Okay, rewards. As we discussed before, it's a big motivator, so you want to get paid more, right? But the bounty table is arguably more important. It's a subcategory of rewards, where the bounty table lists how much money you can expect to make, depending on the criticality of the bug. And if you're the type of hacker that's really good at automating stuff, that you can find low-hanging fruit really fast, well then maybe you want to get paid for the low end of the spectrum. But if you're the type of guy that sits in front of ugly C++ code for 6 months at a time to chain 3 vulnerabilities to finally find that big exploit, that remote code execution vulnerability, then you really care about the critical stuff. And maybe you want to get paid more there. Well, legal safe harbor makes a comeback. People compare different programs to one another to get the strongest legal guarantees when they're working on programs. Oh, sorry. All right. So those are some of the distinguishing factors between the programs, right? But it doesn't seem like platforms so far is a big part of the equation. It maybe seems like platforms don't have a place. Well, we looked at that. We asked why people care, what features people care about in platforms. And turns out ease of payment and ease of reporting, so just being paid and being able to report in a standardized way was the top 2 factors, by far, with these platforms. It's very basic utility that the platforms provide that people like. Next is being able to view those disclosed vulnerabilities that we talked earlier. It's a big part of how you learn, how you understand these programs. What we found also is that the program directory, which is essentially viewing all these things in one place, being able to compare them, was the 5th most important feature according to hackers. I would argue that This is the reason why bug bounty platforms exist. It's to aggregate platform programs together, which I thought was surprising. Okay, so we talked about all these benefits and how people select between programs, but this isn't a perfect world. There are problems with this space. And this is one of our main motivators for looking at this stuff. And so turns out that the big problems are all communication and dispute related, starting off with responsiveness. By far, the top challenge that people face. On the right, you'll see some screenshots of actual bug reports. You see the poor guy couldn't get a response in like a week. But essentially what the complaint here is that you submit a bug, you put in all that effort, and you don't hear back. Or you hear back and it's not fixed in a long time. You don't get paid on time. These are all big frustrations that hackers face. Dissatisfaction with responses. You've submitted the bug with a certain compensation in mind or a certain impact in mind, and turns out the triage team doesn't agree, and in this case, downgrades it from severe to, well, high severity to none, not applicable, which can be quite frustrating to people. Duplicates are also, they fall into this space, so maybe someone reported the bug before you did, but the bug wasn't fixed, and so you don't get anything. Highly frustrating. Scoping issues is another one. In this case, it's a pretty clear scoping issue where apparently this company didn't think SQL injections were in scope. Depressing fact, that bug got exploited later on. They lost a bunch of user data, and then they retrospectively went back and paid the hacker for reporting it. But you know, you're supposed to not get hacked after you've like gotten a bug report. This is a clear line with scoping, but scoping is often interesting. It's not a science. There's all this gray area. Think about the scenario where a domain is in scope, right? The domain is heavily reliant on this new, say, fancy machine learning library. The hacker goes and finds a vulnerability within the machine learning library, which affects your product. The product team might not necessarily see that as their problem. They might say, we didn't implement it. Why are we supposed to pay for it, right? But from the hacker's perspective, it was your product that was insecure. So there's all this gray area that happens, and it often results in these disputes. Well, what happens with these disputes is mediation can kick in. And mediation is the bug bounty platform jumps in between the program and the hacker and tries to mediate, tries to find a common ground, right? Turns out hackers aren't happy with the mediation either. They think it's one-sided. They think it only works for bug bounty programs and not the hackers. Okay, so what can these problems lead to? Well, this is where our interviews come in. We get some pretty clear ideas of what the problems are, what these problems can cause, including hunters quitting or getting deplatformed from bug bounties. And these guys are usually the more talented people, the people that have put in years of effort and have developed a skill set of being able to do this stuff. So an already suffering workforce is losing even more. Fixed but unacknowledged bugs. These were essentially accusations of hunters saying that they've reported a bug, the bug was not acknowledged, weeks later the bug was fixed, still not acknowledged, and they never get a response. They essentially accuse the companies of stealing bugs from them. Somewhat in contrast to that, we also found people saying they wouldn't report certain bugs, even if it was critical, because they thought it would maybe lead to disputes. Maybe it was out of scope. Maybe they think the impact is too big and they might get sued because it looks like it's real hacking. And I think that's pretty concerning. The bug is already found, right? It feels like a mistake to be made. Waiting to be made. What we also found is this idea that, well, I want to say that it's a fact, that bug bounties, it's a market, and the bugs are a commodity, right? They hold value for the companies because companies can fix them and help make their products more secure, or they could be exploited and someone can make a lot of money off of it, depending on the bug. And so we've heard about these hackers that contemplate, like, should I stay legal and settle for this amount of money, or should I really get the big bucks and go exploit it myself or sell it, which surprisingly isn't that hard to do. And I think this is fascinating people thinking about going to the black market instead of staying legal. All right, what to do? Well, we think a couple different entities are responsible for fixing this stuff or helping alleviate this stuff, starting off with bug bounty programs. They are the funders, right? They're the ones that are coming up with these bug bounty programs and asking people to find vulnerabilities to begin with. They can look into the impact of increased scope and rewards. Now, what do I mean by that? Why just look into it and not just do it? Because increasing scope and rewards isn't that straightforward. You need a team to deal with the increased bugs. You need to pay more money. You need some more infrastructure. It's not that straightforward. And especially considering the communication pitfalls that can happen because of a backlogged bug report stack, they should look into it, really think about it. It's not that easy to run a bug bounty program, even if they're cheaper than a red team. Okay. But I think what a lower bar is to satisfy some of the communication pitfalls, to help fix some of those. At the very least, maybe updating your hunters that have submitted reports, just saying we're still working on it, sending a little ping every once in a while might show some good intent and reduce hacker frustration. Bug bounty platforms have a big role to play here. They're the ones that are aggregating everyone, right? I think they should fix the perceptions of mediation. I think that perceptions of mediation and the viability of these platforms to begin with, it's satisfying hackers and bug bounty programs. You can't have one or the other. You can't have the system work without one or the other. They should also look at improving their learning resources. There's some good research on how to create learning resources that are effective based on science, based on academic endeavors. The bug bounty hunters also have a role here. Now, again, we're looking at this problem from a hunter's perspective, but no problem is one-sided. If there's an issue, there's two stories to it at least. And so, especially the case with communication, maybe hunters get a little bit too hot-headed and they swear off the bug bounty team, right? They share some responsibility too. Just want to acknowledge that. Finally, policymakers have a role here. I would argue that could help with incentives to create programs, maybe through grants and whatnot. Because again, the more the reward and the more the scope, the more people are incentivized to look at these programs. And we've seen some of these efforts in the United States a little bit, but I think there's a lot of room to be improved on. Legal safe harbor is another one. Legal safe harbor currently as it sits is mostly basically a contract between the companies and the hackers. I would argue that hackers need more legal protections than that. We've seen some prosecutors and whatnot decide to not pursue hackers because they were doing this stuff in good faith, but I think they need stronger protections here. Okay, here are my takeaways. Bug bounty programs work well for companies. In this work, we ask, what about the hunters? What about the workers that are doing all the work here? Turns out rewards and learning are big motivators, but reputation isn't necessarily. Learning is also important because it could possibly help bolster the cybersecurity workforce. We find that scope is most important when choosing a program, including the technology within the scope. And communication issues and disputes are among the top challenges. We think that bug bounty platforms, bug bounty programs, the bug hunters themselves, and policymakers can help alleviate some of these problems with the space. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Omer. So, questions from the audience. Are there any? There we have one.
Hi, Stefan Susanto. I would be interested in the Chinese participants in your survey. It seems because the bug bounty programs there have been massively restructured, right? The government coming in is like, you have to report to us first before you actually release a bug or a report in the public, right? The same discussions are happening across Europe in terms of send it first to the government and so on. So what do you see there in terms of the government coming in, how that might influence all these platforms, and where is it going to head?
That's a good question. I've thought about this a little bit. So for this study, it was done before the changes. The data was collected before then. So I don't think we have any insight there. I I would. Okay, this is pure speculation. I would say that it's more likely that the hackers that are doing this stuff just wouldn't care what the government says. In a lot of cases, they tend to be anonymous online anyway. So maybe it won't be as effective of a law. Maybe it's more of like a pretext law where if they want to go pursue someone, they'll just like throw that in as well. It's definitely concerning. I'm not going to say it's not concerning. It's just maybe it's not as severe as we make it out to be, I would say.
Thank you. There's one more question.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. I'm in contact with a couple of companies for doing bug bounty for my organization. We never signed a contract yet because I think we're not mature enough to do this yet. Are you aware of some catalogs so I can get an idea what the bounties are? So taking OWASP top 10 or whatever else and saying, look here, this is where I have to budget for. I know that it's complicated, but think what is a cross-site scripting vulnerability worth? What is remote code executing worth? So you get some spreadsheet with some ballpark figures. Of course, I understand you can't boil it down to the cent, but at least give me an idea how much I have to put in, and then I can scale it up to my expectations, how many cross-site scripting vulnerabilities we have, and so on.
Yeah. So I would. Well, first of all, I would love that data myself. I would use it in a research project or something. I would say probably the best estimates you could get is by looking at the public programs that are already out there. They have their bounty tables. They show how much they're going to pay. There are a bunch of programs that don't pay anything. They just acknowledge the bugs. So that's an option too, though. That's really I don't know if you really want to go that route. The companies probably do have good data on this. But yeah, I don't have a clean answer. I would say looking at the public programs that are already out there is probably going to give you the best idea. Looking into private programs might also be a good idea. So not every bug bounty program is public. Some of them are just open to a select set of hackers. And in that case, you can somewhat control the amount of reports you're going to get more than if you just made it public.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Do we have one more question? If not, I had one.
All right.
Taking on the perspective of the hackers, is there any means of steering where to start? Because one of the issues, of course, is completeness of the examination of the subject of what has been tested. And is there a way for the hunters to know where the others are working at, sort of that they don't have duplicates in the system by the start?
Yeah. So this is a big problem. The way hunters will try to gauge this, and there's a lot of variables involved here. It's on what the scope is, how many hackers there are on it, is it public or private, right? Lots of things. Has the thing been tested before versus not? Generally, what they will do is they will look at how many reports are being submitted, when it was launched, and if the thing was tested before. And then they'll get an idea of what's going on. Some people prefer to participate in private programs because of this, because private programs tend to not have that many hackers on it. Though we've heard both sides of the story, where some people prefer public programs because of the same reason. Surprise, surprise, hunters are very opinionated and they often dispute one another.
For sure, for sure. So let me ask the audience, who of you has participated as a hunter in a bug bounty program?
I've done it once.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I count. Who of you has ordered a bug bounty program or ordered a platform to launch a program? Hopefully not quite the same people. Well, I see
Some overlap.
6, 7. Okay, great. Good. And do you mind sharing some of the expertise or the experience that you have made with those programs? Is there anything that would contribute to what we have heard or complement or contradict?
I'd love to hear.
Can we get the microphone? Sorry.
Yes. Just the guy behind me asked the question. Sorry. Yes. So how much to pay for each bug class? And in my experience, it doesn't make that much sense to have like a category of payment, like I will pay 500 euros an XSS, etc. It's highly dependent of the business of the operating program. And for instance, like Facebook could pay 60,000 euro for an XSS because in this particular context is really highly sensitive, highly critical.
Yeah.
And same for PayPal, since if you have an XSS on PayPal, you can basically force someone to make a payment. And depending on the application, you could either pay 1,000 or 200 euros, and in the same way, it's like the same as a critical vulnerability for just an XSS. And it also depends on like the targeted application. If it's an SQL injection, out of scope, but like targeting a target that is not important to the program, it doesn't matter that much. Even though the class is critical in itself, it's always dependent of the program. So
You have to factor in the impact.
Yeah, that's one of the problems with this space, is that there's just so many variables that go into it. There's maybe like 15, 20 papers on bug bounties, and we still don't really have that great of an idea.
Great. Any more questions or comments? One more.
Thank you very much. My name is Mona from Swiss Post. We have a public bug bounty program for voting since more than almost 3 years. Maybe just a remark and a question at the same time regarding the topic you raised before about not reported bugs. So currently we have a maximum bounty of 230 euro, €1,000 if you break the whole system. And you can imagine it's always the question, is it high enough or not? So we are sometimes challenging this internally. I don't know if you can go a bit further in this not reported category and how hurting things.
So I think to an extent, the not reporting issue is somewhat because people are afraid that the company might take an action that they don't want happening, right? If the program, for the most part, is showing that it's willing to work with hackers no matter what, as long as they're in good faith, then I think that's a big incentive. I think in this case, it might not necessarily be about the amount of money that's keeping them from reporting it, but the repercussions that they fear that they're going to face if they submit an out-of-scope bug or something like that. Hope that makes sense.
All right, then I guess it's the moment where the crowd is coming in. So to thank Omer again. Thank you, Omer.
Yep.
And what I should not, by the way, is my microphone turned on? Yes. What I should not forget is to give you a beautiful piece of Swiss chocolate.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
It's delicious, I can tell.
All right. I really appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Omer.
Let's take this.